What really happened when Jean-Claude Van Damme fought Chuck Zito? One of the weirdest martial arts myths of all time has to be the fight between Jean-Claude Van Damme and Chuck Zito. For those out of the loop, Chuck Zito is a former boxer and bodyguard who was also the leader of the Hells Angels in New York for a good while. Although Zito is undoubtedly a colourful character, it's fair to say that he's far less known compared to Van Damme, who was an international superstar at his peak. In any case, back in 1998, the pair got into a fight inside a Manhattan strip club. Sadly, this story is as trashy as it sounds, but well over 20 years later, people are still talking about it on the internet. In this video, we shall go through what really happened, or at least try to get to the bottom of things. Firstly is Chuck Zito's side of the story. Since the 1998 incident, Zito has spoken about it a few times. Once he was a guest on the Howard Stern show and spoke openly about it. There's also an extract from his 2003 autobiography, Street Justice, where the incident is also mentioned. In short, Zito was a bodyguard for Van Damme in the late 90s. Apparently, as professionals, the two didn't get on, so after a few weeks, Zito quit the job. Then, by chance, the two met in a New York strip club where Van Damme was rude to him and swore towards Zito. This resulted in Zito punching Van Damme in the face whilst he was sitting down, and then landing a few more as he got up. After this, Zito fled, and Van Damme was thrown out of the club for aggressive behaviour. More specifically, in the autobiography, Zito writes, "And with that, I hit him twice, a straight right and a left hook. Bam bam. Jean-Claude's chair flipped over backward, and he landed on the lap of my friend Kevin Lubitsch. I started hitting him with everything I had. Jean-Claude barely even tried to fight back, he just tried to shield himself. When he covered his head, I hit him in the body. When he covered his body, I hit him in the face. It went on like that for about 30 seconds until the bouncers jumped in." Remember, this is Zito's account of things, and obviously he would view things differently compared to Van Damme, judging his actions in a more favourable light. While Zito's account would always view things in a certain way, you have to remember that this is his own opinion, and people often say scandalous things in autobiographies for promotional reasons. Here's what could have happened. As we know, Van Damme was sitting on a chair whilst he got punched by Zito. Instantly, this does not sound like a fair fight, and has led to people saying he got hit with a sucker punch. Apparently, Van Damme was putting his glasses on his face when Zito started swinging. Secondly, Van Damme was also meant to be using cocaine at this point. This isn't just a rumour, as he has admitted using the drug during the 90s, allegedly spending $10,000 a week on the drug. Unsurprisingly, this could have fueled the tension between him and Zito, which combined with alcohol could have made Van Damme say some very regrettable things. Ultimately, we'll never know what happened between Jean-Claude Van Damme and Chuck Zito, and most of the story is pure talk and speculation. It seems like Van Damme has moved on from the incident and rarely talks about it, whereas Zito is far more talkative about the issue. What's worth noting is that even when reading about Zito's version of events, it doesn't sound like a fair fight. If you punch someone whilst they're sitting down, the likelihood is that it wasn't expected, as the opponent has no time to defend or protect themselves. Having said this, if Jean-Claude Van Damme truly was using cocaine and trash talking at the time, then he is likely not blameless either. Remember, Zito was a real guy from the streets who was a decent boxer and wouldn't take disrespect lightly, so his reaction was likely to be expected. It sounds like Van Damme was no stranger to beef in the late 90s either, having previously confronted Steven Seagal during a house party involving Sylvester Stallone. Returning to Zito, had the two fought in some kind of MMA rules promotion, then things may have been very different. Remember, Van Damme was a solid kickboxer during his prime and was certainly a legitimate martial artist. However, this episode is a good example of street fights and how they're not always fair or in line with moral rules. In summary, it sounds like Chuck Zito got the better of Van Damme, but it may have been a cheap shot more than a full-on brawl.